Pardon?
You sent an email to our school one?
On a Google Classroom.
Oh, you're supposed to Google Classroom.
Yeah, because I figure you're looking at Google Classroom to see what I post.
Oh, we figured because they you're just showing videos.
No. All right, let's look at polling. We have a lot to do today. This is the day that I lecture. And polling is interesting from the perspective of, right now we're looking at a lot of polls. Tomorrow we're going to be working with polls. We're going to break down a couple polls on Real Clear Politics, so that you get cursor must be on this. All right, there are a number of types of polls that we're going to look at. But first, before we look at that type of poll, we need to look at the reasons or the influences on polls. And when we look at the type of publics, there's three. The smallest is the one that wields the most power. That's the elite. And elites have a disproportionate amount of political resources. They have the money, they have the time, they have the power. So this, theoretically, is linked to elite and class theory, which has, from some perspectives, wields the most power. And that's true of the elites. So not only do they have a disproportionate amount of political resources, they also raise the issues that they believe the nation should tackle. And then they influence resolving those issues. Now I'm recording this, so I'll upload it so you'll have it, but so I'm not going to wait for you guys to finish typing. Now, I'm not part of the elite. I wish I was, but I'm not. But I am part of the attentive public. I have an active interest in government and politics. I watch news and political programming. I'm maybe 20% of the Americans who are in that. Maybe elites are 5% or less. That means that approximately 75% of Americans are what we call mass. And the mass public has little interest in government and politics. Now, many of them will participate because they do have a sense of civic duty. They do have internal and external political efficacy. But that's about all they've got.
So 75%, 20%, and 5%?
Approximately. So we know that 50% of all those eligible to vote, those who are 18 and older, don't even register to vote. So that means right away you've got 50% who don't participate. Then you've got half of that, if we're split down the middle, you've got 25 and 25% of people who are either to the left or to the right, or practically the middle is the big thing here. But what you find is that not only is a small group of people influencing the decisions, but a small group of people are making the decisions that affect the rest of us. Until you get involved, that's not going to change. So any questions on elite or mass? Okay, so I also want to put a definition in here. What is public opinion? And public opinion simply is the opinions of people about elected officials. We're passing judgment when? Are we working in a void? What happens in the first week of November? Pardon? Well, midterm elections happen on November 4th. We're going to pass judgment on elected officials. Some we will return to office. Some we will reject. There's opinions on candidates. In the back, please. There's opinions on public policy. What's been the issue in the last couple of weeks? The E word. Ebola. Has the administration looked good on Ebola policy? No. Which has had an effect on how they act. And we've also been asked our opinion on government institutions. Has the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, experienced good press in the last couple of weeks? No. Which makes us look at our government in an even worse way. So a definition of public opinion is the opinions of people about elected officials, candidates, public policy, and government institutions. At the same time, public opinion also measures your personal values, your beliefs, and your attitudes. Now, what's a value? Pedro, what's a value? Are you guided by values? Yeah, you are. It's your basic guiding goals. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they're all good, but Mr. Romans is good. It's those basic guiding goals and priorities. He sets objectives and goals in his life. His goal is to graduate from high school. Is that a valid goal? Yeah, of course. Of course. And Jed has beliefs, understanding of events, visions of the future, where he would like to be. And Victoria has attitude. She's got attitudes about things in everyday life. She judges people. She judges events. We all do that. Not just Victoria. We all do that. And so what public opinion polling is supposed to do is create a link between public opinion and government policy. This is part of the media thing. Remember, there's 3 links. Political parties, elections 2, so there's 4. Media and interest groups. This is part of media and part of interest groups. And part of political parties. So polling kind of covers all 3, because all 3 of them use polling to push their agenda. All right, now, this is not in your book, so you'll need to write this down, either now or when you watch this again. This is not in very many books, but there are types of opinions that we have, and they overlap, so remember that too. A stable opinion is one that doesn't change very much. And an example of that would be the death penalty. It's been pretty stable since the 1960s, about 2/3 for and about 1/3 against. Now, right now it's about 60-40, but it hasn't changed very much. It's very, very stable. The opposite of that would be fluid. A fluid opinion is one that changes frequently. Presidential election polls, presidential popularity, change frequently. Latent means that these are dormant. And I always use this example. Jed, are you 18?
Almost.
Almost. What do you have to do when you turn 18?
Register.
Register for?
Draft.
The draft, selective service. Victoria, do you have to do that when you turn 18? No, you don't. Does that then get a, it's not on your radar. Then you turn 18 and you have to register. And you might be very, very much opposed to that. And you think, how unfair is that girls don't, or females don't have to register, and I do. But then, once you realize that nothing's going to happen to you, that all it is, it's data gathering by the government. Worst case scenario, how many people could we draw upon in a draft? Then you realize that, really was nothing. It becomes a more dormant opinion. So latent opinions are usually dormant, but they can be aroused. So when you're 18, you got to do this. You're scared that if you don't do it, they could level a fine against you, even put you behind bars, which they can do if you don't register. But you realize later on that really nothing's going to happen. Then there's an intense opinion. Abortion. And intense and non-intense, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Intensity. Abortion is one that gets an intense opinion. Whereas a non-controversial issue will get a non-intense opinion. Do you think that classes at school should be, it might be a co-ed high school, but classes within school should be sex segregated? All boys or all girls? Not intense. I got to tell you now, I'm absolutely in favor of that. Why? Because girls and boys learn differently. They do. They learn differently. And it's especially important. It's especially important in science and in math. In social studies and in English, it's a lot less important. But in those two subjects, it's tough. It's tough if you're a female. Not as tough as it used to be, but it's still tough. Then you've got salient. Now, this is an important thing. It has some importance to individuals. So I use James Brady, who just recently died. He was President Reagan's press secretary in 1981. He was shot when the president was shot, except James Brady was shot in the head. And James Brady survived, but it also meant that they had to take out part of his brain, so his head was malformed after that. His wife, Sarah Brady, and he pushed for gun control after that. It was a personal issue. Candy Lightner did the same thing. Who's Candy Lightner? Anybody know? 10 years ago, you guys would have known who she is. Nowadays, you never hear about it because her organization has kind of went by the wayside. MADD. Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Candy Lightner lost her daughter to a drunk driver. So she pushed tougher drunk driving laws. Was that personal to her? Absolutely. Now the last two are consensus and polarized. They kind of match up with that. Consensus it's about 75%. So here, consensus is plus 75% or more. Polarized is minus 75% or more. So a consensus opinion would be having a balanced budget, all kids being in school, all children being vaccinated. That's a consensus opinion. A polarized opinion would be like what my third period discussed last week, abortion. That's a polarizing opinion. Split right down the middle of the country. Split right down the middle of my class. 39 in there. 20 pro-life, 19 pro-choice. More guys pro-life, more girls pro-choice. Isn't that interesting? It's an interesting dynamic. Interesting dynamic, to say the least. Yeah. So, before we look at polls, we kind of need to look at why they exist and what they're measuring. And when we look at polls, we have to ask ourselves, why do they exist? Well, first and foremost, an election itself, the election on November 4th, is a poll. But it's a poll that has concrete results. You either win or lose. Other types of polling just represents a look at where you're at on a certain day at a certain time, or where an issue is at on a certain day or a certain time. And the other thing is, elections don't tell us certain things. Do they tell us who won? Does an election tell us who won? Yeah. Does an election tell us other things? Yes. But does it tell us why they won?
No.
No, they don't. That's why it takes polling to ferret that out. So elections are deceiving. It doesn't tell us why people voted that way. It tells us who won. It might tell us, based on what we see, when people made that decision. Independents are going to be making decisions this week. We're within 9 days of the election. I think 8 days now of the election. So indies are making up their mind, because those are basically, in many states, the only ones left, and they're a very small group. In indies, usually, what we call indies or independents, usually break toward the party that is not in power. So they're not going to break toward President Obama, most likely. That's traditional. In 2006, they broke against Bush. In 1994, they broke against Clinton. It's just the way things are. Now, straw poll. Is that accurate? A straw poll?
No.
No. It's accurate for the day and the time, but it doesn't take into account. What if it's a straw poll in which you have 40 people and 37 of them are female? Is that a fair poll? No, but you might get a look at how female voters feel, but it's not scientific. Scientific polls have some elements and have some construction. We're going to be looking at that through a web quest that I'll upload tonight. I've got to change it from 2012, and there were things I just couldn't do last night simply because since the district's been down since Friday, there were things I couldn't access. Power School is up. That's not a surprise. Pearson actually had to come in this morning, apparently. So first and foremost, we have to define the universe. Now, I put two numbers up there, 500 to 1,500. That's generally the average size of a poll. That's your universe, 500 to 1,500. Can it be larger than that? Yes. Can it be smaller than 500? Yes. The problem is, the smaller the number, the more inaccurate the poll can be. Yeah. Census tracts. Yeah. So, how do they define the universe? Well, they use census data. That's why it's important that it gets refined every 10 years, because places change. Look at the difference in Palmdale between 1992 and 2002. It exploded. Then the difference between 2000 and 2010. Very, very much a change again. So what we have here is what we call random sampling. And random sampling simply says that each person in the universe, all of you, have an equal chance of being selected to participate in a poll. Now, I participated in a poll 2 weeks ago. The only issue that they're talking about was Prop 47. Anybody know what that is? No, that's 46, 45. 46 is trial lawyers. And right now they're pushing the only thing that they have, which is, you see the commercials where the surgeon is at the bar drinking before he goes into surgery. That's about the only issue that they have. They're getting battered the other way. But no, 47 is about, should we reduce felony penalties for misdemeanors? I think it's misdemeanors. Should we treat minor crime differently? And I think we should. 47 is not the way to do it. So personally for me, you can do what you want. I'm voting no on 47 because I don't think laws should be changed. Laws like this complicated issue should be changed through public initiative. It's like there's just too much going on there. And I told the pollster that. I said, you can keep asking your questions. I was on the phone for 30 minutes with this pollster who asked the question, who asked questions again and again in slightly different ways. But they're trying to elicit an unbiased answer. So national polling usually is 1,500 or more, no more than 2,500 because polling is expensive. But nowadays, as we're going to see when we look at polls tomorrow, you're going to see probably anywhere from 450 to 750. But again, the smaller the sample, the more variability in the poll. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, because you want the polls to be accurate. Okay, let me pause this for a second. All right, guys. All right, so what we have here is, as a review again, a random sample is a complete listing of all available people. And a poll then takes a certain part of that random sample to be interviewed. So everybody has an equal chance of being selected. Now, their problem is, and this is why the census tracts are important, they've got to make sure that it's regionally balanced, that not too many people are from the south or too many people are from the north or from the west. They've got to make sure that that ethnicity, race, gender, education, all of that is taken into account. And nowadays, they have to also take into account whether you have a landline or a cell phone. Landlines would skew the results in what way? Older people, thank you. And cell phones? Younger people, millennials. And that would, so now that, now they have that down, they're always, this is why polling is expensive. But it's also very lucrative, especially in election years. How many people are putting polls out right now? There's probably 10 to 12 to 15 organizations, including colleges, that are doing it. And we'll look at some of those tomorrow. We'll see how many polling organizations are out there. So for every group, let's say of 100, this is the easiest number that we can look at. For every group of 100, are the results of the poll going to be the same if you're asked the same questions? No. So a poll of 100, let's say question X in group A gets 51%, but in group B it only gets 48%, in group C it gets 49%. We know by looking at how statistically it's all extrapolated that there's something called a sampling error. So we know that, let's say that Lawson is a candidate and he's trying to figure out where's the polling at. And he looks at the polling and it says, well, right now we say you're at 48%, but there's a plus or minus 3. So you could be as low as?
3?
No. No, I said 48%. So you could be as low as? 45 or as high as? 51. So when you look at the sampling error, you have to factor that in, that there was some variability. There's going to be a variability in every poll. The wider the sampling error, the less reliable the poll. If you have a plus or minus 5 or 6, how reliable are the results? That's a wide, if it's 1 or 2, then you're in pretty good shape. And the poll numbers are really solid. Right, and we're going to look at sampling, we'll look at sampling error tomorrow when we look at actual polls on Real Clear Politics. So here's the thing, the smaller the sample, the greater the sampling error. But at the other end, you could do 5,000 respondents and get something that's fairly accurate, but the response in the poll isn't any better than if you surveyed 2,500 or even 1,500. So polling organizations really don't go above that 1,500 because they figure for them the results aren't any better at 25 or 5,000. And for some organizations, they feel that the polling at 1,500 isn't any more accurate than at 600 or 700. But again, it takes time. It takes time to do these. Now, here's the other big thing. Writing the question. Let's say I ask Emily, don't you think that abortion is murder? Is that a leading question?
Yes.
She may answer it. She may think that it isn't, but she also, in her mind, she goes, oh, I don't want to be considered a murderer. So she's going to actually answer the question in a way that doesn't reflect her true feelings. Why? Because the question itself was biased. But if she gets an unbiased question, then she will answer honestly. That's what the pollsters want. Now you're going to get some organizations which do a poll. The questions are totally biased. You get the expected answers, and then you release the poll. Well, look how our people feel. Well, no wonder. They were led down that path by your bad questioning. So when we look at the poll tomorrow, we'll look at one of the polls, or you'll get a chance to look at one of the polls. You'll see how unbiased the questions are. They have to be in order to elicit a true response from you. And of course, the selection of the means. Telephone, cell phone, face-to-face. Face-to-face usually is more exit polling than anything else. Usually though, when candidates call or an initiative calls, it's by phone. And they try to get that mix of cell phone. Now, what are the why this keeps popping up? So what are the other things that they have to look at? Well, the sample has to include a representative number of people. I'm sorry. Yeah. So you've got to worry about things like gender, right? Race, ethnicity, income, education, and the list goes on. You want it to reflect the electorate. So you have, age, region. All of those are important elements in putting together a group, a sample. And these are definitely important things. So with women, there's a gender gap. Women are more likely to vote Democrat than they are Republican. Men are more likely to vote Republican than they are Democrat. But married women move to the right as opposed to their single sisters. Married women with children are the soccer moms. They drop their kids off at soccer practice or what other sport they're playing. And in the 90s, for them it was all about education and health. But after 9/11, it was all about safety. And they moved over to Republicans. In 2008, they moved back and voted for President Obama. It seems in 2014, with ISIS, they're on the move again. Back to the right. They're worried about their kids and the safety of their kids. Age. The more older you are, the more likely you are to be conservative, besides being old. conservative, and Republican. The more money you make, the more education you have, you're more likely to be Republican or conservative. In the South, you're more likely to be Republican. If you're black, you're more likely to be Democrat. Doesn't matter what socioeconomic level you are. So gender, age, class, region, race, all affect the outlook of the people who are being sampled. So again, a sample is the small proportion of the population. The random sample is something that you can be part of if you're chosen. And the sampling error is the level of confidence in the findings of the pollsters. That's where you get the plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, something like that. Ooh, we're making good time today. So you might ask yourself then, why are we using the polls? Well, the polls do a number of things. They inform the public. I look at the polls, I wonder what other Americans are thinking about and how they're thinking about the issues. They inform the candidates. If candidate Jones wants to know if she stands a chance or wants to know how her district feels on certain issues, she commissions a poll to be done. She may then gear her campaign based on the 2 or 3 issues that she feels are important in the district. You want to work and avoid. If Miss Nixon is already an office holder, she doesn't want to stick her finger up in the air to feel which way the wind is blowing on an issue. She wants to know exactly how people are feeling, so she can make more informed decisions. Then we have exit polls, which are a whole different animal. Exit polls are interesting in that there's a number of things that we worry about. Polling itself is interesting. Right now, I was watching Fox and CNN yesterday to get a gander of both are different influences. And they're looking at all the Senate races and the gubernatorial races, but in primarily the Senate races. What are they focused on? Anybody know? Who's ahead? Who's behind? And what that causes is a problem in which the focus is on what we call the horse race. Who's ahead? Who's behind? And this comes at the expense of the issues. They're only talking about who's winning and who's losing, not why. Though I did hear a pretty good conversation between 3 pollsters and Harris Faulkner, who is an anchor on Fox. And they were talking about, why aren't Republicans running away with this? Well, basically, it wasn't about who was ahead and who was behind, and that being the gist of the conversation. It was the fact that the Republicans haven't molded a message. And so therefore, voters really don't know exactly what they stand for. Voters may be anti-Obama, and they are, because generally the polls bear that out, but the Republicans haven't sold themselves either. So that may mean that people stay home on Election Day. So we know that not only is there a horse race mentality, but we also know that pollsters give candidates the information. The candidates will sometimes change their stance on an issue because the polling says your former stance is going to cost you the election. And we see that. How's the polling been on Ebola? Does the government, do the people have faith in how the government's handling the Ebola crisis? No. 3 weeks ago, the president was adamant there's no need for a travel ban from West Africa. Where are Americans at on the issue? 60 to 70% say there should be a travel ban. Has the administration had to move? Yeah, it's had to move on the issue. They're still opposed to a travel ban, but they put certain things into place. You can only travel from West Africa into 5 airports: O'Hare, Hartsfield, Newark, Kennedy, and Dulles. Not a travel ban, but it's getting closer to where Americans feel more comfortable. Now, the problem with the polls, the exit polls, we fall back this weekend, right?
Yeah.
We fall back this weekend. When you fly to New York, it's 9 o'clock here. Let's say it's 9 o'clock here. What time is it in New York? It's noon. So on election night, polls will close in New York City at 9 o'clock, but they close in, let's say, North Carolina at 8. What time is it in California? 5 o'clock. Are polls still open in California? Yes, they are. We have a problem with polling. Now, the networks are much, much better than they used to be with exit polling and reporting results, primarily because they've gotten burned so many times. The 2000 election is a great example of that. So you'll see on election night, they'll talk about exit polling telling us what the exit poll said, and it'll talk about the issues themselves, what voters were concerned about. What they're hesitant to do is put that data in to predict which candidate will win before actual results come in. Because here's the problem. We know now that voters lie, and voters especially lie to exit poll takers. So Lawson, he votes, he walks out, and an exit pollster will say, "How did you vote?" And he tells them everything that he didn't do. He voted for candidate A, but he tells the pollster he voted for candidate B. Why? We have no idea. But in Florida in 2000, this actually happened. The networks collected the data that day. The data told them that Gore was going to win in Florida, and it would be comfortable, and that these were the issues. So early on, looking at the exit polling data, the networks called the state of Florida for Gore. The problem was a couple things. Number one, Florida is one of those few states that's divided into 2. Indiana is another one. The thumb of Florida is in the Eastern time zone. The Panhandle can't be this funny. The Panhandle is in the Central time zone. So by calling the election for Gore right after the polls closed in Miami Beach and in Jacksonville and in Orlando, people in Pensacola thought, why go bother and vote? The election's been called. Gore's probably going to win. The problem was, as the data came in, as the voting came in, it wasn't matching the exit polling results. So a couple hours in, after calling the election for Gore, the people at NBC and CBS and CNN are all looking at the data and go, oh my God, Gore's not going to win this election. Bush is going to win this election. So they now call the state for Bush. Trouble is, the results get closer and closer and closer. Now, what's really embarrassing, after the networks called the state for Bush, who calls Bush to congratulate him? Gore does. Then when they pulled the state back from Bush, Gore basically had to call and say, I didn't really mean it. It's embarrassing. There's a great HBO movie on this election night. The Bush people were livid that Gore would do this. But hey, the Florida election had become so close, no one could tell who won. The most egregious case, 1980. The election turned in the last week. It was neck and neck between Carter and Reagan. But in the last week, Reagan really began to pull it out. On election night, it was obvious Reagan was going to win. Carter went out at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. What time is it in the West? 6. He concedes the election to Reagan. How did California Democrats feel about that? Yes, and you know what? They didn't go out and vote. Carter's decision to go out and concede the election at 9 o'clock hurt the Democrats in the West. Why go vote if it's already decided, right? It hurt the Democrats at the state level. Gubernatorial races, House races, and things like that. So nowadays, the networks are really, really sensitive to what could be flawed data. They're going by the GIGO rule, garbage in, garbage out. And so they're very, very careful about endorsing or making a prediction as to who's going to win a state or who's going to win an election in a state. And so consequently, polling has had some problems. Now, what time do we get out of here?
7 minutes.
7 minutes. Okay, I'm going to let you watch this at home. There's a problem with polls video that you can watch. I'm going to upload this. The video is already uploaded. All you have to do is click on this.
Is that our subnotes or?
This will be uploaded today, so it'll be there with the notes. So again, read the next section, which is all about polling in the book. It's only like 5 pages, I think.
Really?
Yeah, it's again, your book, I don't think it's very good in this section. That's why I'm having to give you more and why I lectured today. Tomorrow we'll look at polls so you have a better grasp of what they do and what they don't do. Watch this tonight. And then we've already went over this.
Oh, yeah.
I want to make sure that this got in before you watch the video. Yeah. Same thing with this. We've already covered it. Now, final thing. Final thing. There's a public awareness and interest in politics, but it's limited. And polling is a very, very much secondary importance to most people. More people would probably know the dimensions of Kim Kardashian's butt than they would who's running. That's really sad. That's really sad. Most people could not identify a political candidate, but they could point to Jennifer Aniston and go, oh, that's her. I know who that is. But you show them a picture of Joe Biden, and it's like, who's that? Which is really sad. So there's a substantial lack of political knowledge on the part of the public. You can identify political figures, but again, the people who know who they are very much on the low end. Identifying key issues. Go around college campuses right now, and in many cases you'll ask them, what do you think about ISIS? They don't even know what it is. They can't get off Facebook or Instagram or whatever they're on long enough to even be exposed to what it is. So we know that in 1982, after years and years of debate, 1/3 of American adults said, I've never even heard of the ERA. What is that? The ERA was the Equal Rights Amendment. They've been floating around since the early 70s. In 1993, after extensive debate on the North American Free Trade Agreement, 60% of Americans said, I don't even know what that is. NAFTA, what's that? Don't know. So, now later on this week we're going to look at voter participation, who turns out, who doesn't. We're going to look at some of the demographic factors, and we'll be done with 6. I'm going to go right into go right into media. We'll finish that and we'll test again. I think 4 chapters is probably too long for you guys.
I honestly don't.
Two's good. I feel comfortable with 2.
Here are 2 we got those.